I remember those days like they were yesterday. Our life was picture perfect, at least on the surface. I'd wake up early, kiss Karen goodbye, and head to the office. My plastic manufacturing company was thriving, and I poured everything into it. Long hours, sure, but it was worth it to give my family the life they deserved. Sophie and Jerry were growing up so fast. Sophie, always with her nose in a book, was acing her classes. Jerry was following in my footsteps, eager to learn the ropes of the business. I was proud of them both. Karen and I had our routines. Sunday brunches, evening walks, and of course our beloved yacht trips. That last vacation, God, I can still taste that awful shellfish that laid me low. I insisted Karen enjoy the rest of the trip while I recovered back at the hotel. "I'll be fine," I told her. "Go have fun. I'll join you in a day or two." Those words haunt me now. When I finally felt well enough to return to the marina, the yacht was there, but Karen wasn't. The Coast Guard searched for days, nothing. It was like the sea had simply swallowed her whole. So I remember the day it finally sank in, the day I knew she was truly gone. It wasn't immediate. See, at first I kept thinking she'd pop up, show up disheveled and dazed at some coastal port with some wild story. Maybe the storm had thrown off course or there was some freak accident. I imagined her on an island, like those survival stories you hear about, waiting for rescue. But as the hours turned to days, I began to realize she wasn't just missing, she was lost. It started when I returned to the marina. The boat was there, anchored like we'd left it. It didn't make sense. I remember looking at it, standing on that dock, trying to piece together what could have happened. The storm had rolled in hard the previous night. I wasn't there. That's what ate at me first. Should have been there, but I wasn't. The flu had hit me like a freight train, and I insisted she go out with the kids on the yacht with me. I thought I'd catch up after getting some rest. It felt like the responsible thing, a father's decision to not slow down a family trip just because of some fever. But when I stepped onto the yacht and shouted her name, my voice just slapped back at me empty, so I felt something twist deep in my gut. I dashed from the helm to the aft of the boat, scanning every inch, mind racing through everything we did before I got sick. Could something have gone wrong with the equipment? No, everything was working fine. Tour yachts were always maintained, no expenses spared. I kept calling out for her, my voice cracking as I searched every nook and cranny. The kids were still calling for her too, their confusion palpable. The wind had only just begun calming down when I got on the phone with the Coast Guard. I don't even remember half the details of those initial hours. The static panic, that warning in my brain that something had gone horribly wrong. I barely registered the mechanical sound of the engine starting as the yacht headed out to search the waters. The Coast Guard sent out a crew, scanning the sea under the dim afternoon sun, which slowly began to set behind those heavy clouds still hanging over the horizon. Days went by in that surreal blur. We circled the same stretch of water dozens, hundreds of times, so nothing. No sign of her. No official word from the Coast Guard. She was likely swept overboard during the storm and her body's been carried further out. Those words stuck with me like a damn itch between the ears. Worse, though, was what wasn't said, what hung in the spaces between. That she was dead. Karen was gone. Likely, vanished beneath the cold, dark waves. And I hadn't been there, the little, quiet accusation that hit me again and again. That idea sank in me like lead. I kept seeing her face during those last moments, locked in conversations. The way she'd smile when I cracked and joke. Fuck, I couldn't shake it. Not then, not now either. It only got harder when the days stretched long enough that the Coast Guard officially called off the search. To the kids, Sophie barely a teenager and Jerry just hitting middle school, tried holding on to hope. But I couldn't lie to them. We weren't going to find her. I told them we'd have a memorial, say our goodbyes the best way we could, but every part of it felt hollow. Standing there, hearing the hollow words from the priest or whatever, I don't even remember the specifics of the ceremony. I stared out toward the water the whole time. Sophie cried quietly, but Jerry was stoic. So damn silent through it all. I thought I should have said something fatherly to soothe them, but the words weren't there. They didn't exist. Just this emptiness inside. Karen was gone, and I'd left her alone in her last moments. I tried to throw myself into parenting after that, or at least that's what I told myself. I took the kids to school, cooked meals, attended after-school events. From the outside, maybe we looked functional, but internally I barely existed. It was just going through the motions. The guilt gnawed at me, but I had to keep everything stable for them. Well, that's what I thought I was doing. Mostly, I was maintaining just enough of a shell so I wouldn't break down. Then, months later, when the house had started slipping into cold routine, when dinners felt silent and punctuated only by dull conversations, the detectives came knocking. I'd almost forgotten about her. Well, Not forgotten, not truly, but a part of me had heard so much from investigators early on that I starting down around it. They had no leads. That's what I'd gotten used to, no answers. But this time, it was different. They came with something new, something I really didn't fucking expect. Anonymous tip, they said. Karen had been having an affair with Joseph, a name I vaguely knew. Some senior accountant from her firm. I remember looking at them like they'd run through the wrong house. What the hell are you talking about? Came out of me before I could actually process it. The idea never crossed my mind before then. The room seemed so much quieter after those words, like every tick of the damn clock in the hallway became 100 times louder. Some part of me refused to accept it. Karen, an affair. With that guy? The sheer disbelief swallowed everything else at first. I didn't even know Joseph beyond a few introductory nods at company events, the ones I barely attended anyway. The detectives weren't that subtle in their follow-up questions either. They weren't just feeding me information, they were digging. Did you know? One of them prodded, like they wanted to see a crack. Hell, they were probably waiting for me to fold under some wave of rage or guilt, as if I knew this whole thing was bubbling under the surface the entire time. They tiptoed around accusations, reining in innuendo without stating the obvious, that maybe, just maybe, I had found out and reacted, that they had nothing to go on, nothing real. I stood there numb. Karen and Joseph. That bastard. It turned everything upside down. A new betrayal crept in, shadowing every moment of grief I'd gone through. How? Why? Did this have anything to do with her disappearing? The questions came in full force now, as the detectives gave me space to process before they cleared out. After they left, I couldn't stay still. I sat with the kids but barely heard their questions about homework and school. Couldn't focus. Karen and fucking Joseph. I stared out to the endless expanse of blue, the gentle rocking of the yacht, a constant reminder of where I was. It had been months since Karen disappeared, but the pain still felt as fresh as the day it happened. The guilt gnawed at me. A constant companion I couldn't shake. George, Alex's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Do you want some coffee? I turned to see her standing in the doorway of the cabin, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. Her presence was comforting, in a way I didn't quite understand, or maybe didn't want to understand. Thanks, I muttered, taking the mug from her. Our fingers brushed and I quickly pulled away, focusing on the horizon instead. Alex settled next to me, her shoulder barely touching mine. We sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the lapping of waves against the hull and the occasional cry of a seagull. You know, Alex started, her voice soft, Karen would want you to be happy. I tensed at the mention of my wife's name. How can you know that, after what she did? Alex sighed. I know my sister made mistakes, George, but she loved you in her own way. I scoffed, anger bubbling up inside me. Loved me? She was having enough of me. She was an affair, Alex. She betrayed everything we built together. I'm not defending her actions, Alex said, turning to face me. But holding on to that anger isn't going to bring her back. It's not going to change what happened. I knew she was right, but admitting it felt like another betrayal. I can't stop thinking about it, about her out here, alone. Was she thinking about him when? My voice cracked and I felt Alex's hand on my arm. The touch sent a jolt through me, and I jerked away, nearly spilling my coffee. George, Alex said, her voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I need to tell you something. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since we'd set sail. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and determination. What is it? I asked, suddenly wary. Alex took a deep breath. I've had feelings for you for a long time. Even before Karen, she trailed off, biting her lip. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, disbelief warring with a surge of something else. So what are you saying, Alex? So I'm saying that I care about you, George, more than just as my brother-in-law. I always have. I stood up abruptly, nearly losing my balance on the gently rocking deck. You can't. This isn't. Alex, she was your sister. I know. Alex said, standing up as well. Don't you think I've struggled with this? But Karen's gone, George. And you're still here, still hurting. I just want to help you heal. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind reeling. This is too much. I don't know how to process this. Alex stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch my arm again. This time I didn't pull away. I'm not asking for anything, George. I just wanted you to know you don't have to be alone in this. So I looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there, and for the first time in months, I felt a crack in the wall I'd be built around my heart. It terrified me. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex smiled softly. "You don't have to say anything. Just don't shut me out, okay?" I nodded, unable to form words. As we stood there on the deck, the sun setting behind us, I felt something shift. The guilt was still there, the anger and betrayal still raw. But there was something else now too, a tiny spark of hope. I wasn't sure. But as I looked at Alex, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward after all. That night on the boat, I don't know what came over me. We'd been dancing around it for weeks. Quiet conversations, moments that lingered too long, sitting in the shared silence on the deck. Alex wasn't pushing, but it was like every day we spent together, the space between us somehow got smaller. That night, it disappeared altogether. We'd finished some wine, that red one Alex keeps bringing over. It's her favorite. The bottle sat empty on the small table between us, and the air was thick with that familiar smell of salt and seaweed, the ocean lapping gently at the hull, while the marina slept. She said something about how calm the water was, and I think I tried to talk about the weather, but I could feel it building, this pressure in my throat that was boiling over. And suddenly I was kissing her. So it wasn't some gentle, slow thing either. I kissed her like I was trying to drown out everything in my head, the guilt, the betrayal, the loss. It was raw and chaotic, but she leaned into it like she'd been waiting for me to snap, her fingers curling into my shirt as if she didn't want the moment to slip away. Once it broke open, it was impossible to stop. We ended up below deck, and I'm not proud of how fast or desperate it all felt, but in that moment I needed it. I needed to feel like something could replace the hole Karen left. Alex didn't hesitate, not even a second. The way she pressed against me, the way our bodies moved together made me forget, just for a while, everything else. The passion, it was real, unquestionable. But afterward, when it was over and we lay there, tangled in each other, the ship still rocking us in that steady rhythm, all I could think about was Karen. So I stared up at the dark cabin ceiling, listening to the creaks of the boat, feeling Alex resting against my chest, her hand lightly tracing patterns on my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd done something wrong. Even after everything, that betrayal, those stormy nights I spent convinced she was gone, the affair, part of me still felt loyal to her. It didn't make sense, especially after all the anger I'd choked down since Karen vanished. She was supposed to be dead. I was supposed to be moving forward. But there it was, lodged deep in my chest, that guilt I thought I'd gotten rid of. I didn't sleep much that night, so Alex must sense the shift in the morning. She didn't say anything, but while we sipped coffee on the deck, her eyes watched me like she was waiting for me to admit it still felt wrong somehow. But I couldn't. What was I supposed to do? Throw it back in her face? Tell her it had been a mistake? It's not that simple. It's never that simple. She stayed patient, like always, and acted as if nothing had really changed between us. So it wasn't easy for me, especially in the coming weeks. She knew it too. The nights may have gotten easier, but the weight of Karen still hovered, slipping into moments when I wasn't expecting it. Then the call came from Mason. 2 months had passed by then. I hadn't fully committed to anything with Alex, not really. We tiptoed around each other. A dance of unspoken expectations and stifled emotions. Neither of us brave enough to put labels on what we were doing. The kids didn't have a clue, and frankly, I didn't have the guts to tell them. Mason's voice was as calm and measured as ever when he explained it. Karen had left behind a letter. He offered no details over the phone, but said I should come to his office as soon as possible. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open any old wounds, but curiosity gnawed at me until I couldn't ignore it. Sitting across from Mason in that tidy, too well-organized office, he handed me the envelope with Karen's handwriting scrawled across the front. My fingers almost balked at touching it, as if somehow just holding the letter would be enough to send my mind spiraling again. But I opened it. I had to. It took me a few minutes to comprehend the words, to really believe what I was reading. Karen had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And not just a little while ago, she knew about it before the yacht trip. She spelled it out in that delicate, neat handwriting of hers, like it wasn't a bombshell, explaining how she'd chosen not to undergo treatment. She didn't want to put us through watching her waste away. So then she owned up to the affair like it was a footnote in her story. Not an excuse, but she mentioned looking for a way to numb the pain, the fear of dying alone, and she knew what that infidelity would do to me, but still, she couldn't bring herself to fight. The kicker? It was like some final act of fucked up kindness, her encouraging me to move on with my life. She even brought up Alex, My head spun when I read that part. She'd somehow known that Alex was still there, still holding on to some hope that one day things would work out. It was like she was giving me permission or something. I don't know how long I sat in that office. Mason didn't pry. He sat at his desk, flipping through files like it was just another Tuesday, while my world warped in on itself. When I showed Alex the letter, her reaction was nothing short of gutting. She crumpled to sitting on the edge of the couch, running her fingers through her hair like it would stop her from crying. Karen was her sister, but she'd also deeply resented her, now that resentment clashed with guilt, twisting inside her. She read it over and over, probably trying to find something new between the lines. When she spoke, it wasn't loud. My sister, she knew. She knew. Her voice cracked. So I stood in silence, staring out the window, seeing nothing but the reflection of everything Karen left behind on those damn pages. But whatever line was between Alex and me before, it was clearer now. Karen had left it behind like a trail of breadcrumbs, nudging us toward each other. So we agreed to keep it all hidden, remaining tight-lipped about the letter, preserving Karen's memory. No need to let the kids or Alex's parents know the real story. They shouldn't have to live in that same mess we'd been dumped in. Alex and I stared at each other for a long moment after, both unsure if we were grateful or more haunted for what we shared from Karen's final confession. We started with the kids. I won't lie, Jerry and Sophie were always my biggest concern, more than anyone else. Maybe because they were too young to ever fully grasp the Karen situation. Maybe because I felt like I'd failed them enough already. First with their mom's affair, then her disappearance, and now introducing this new chapter, a chapter one couldn't even truly explain. What could I really tell them? Hey kids, turns out your mom cheated, got lost in a storm, and well, here's your aunt who I'm in love with now. Nothing about it felt easy, and I wasn't sure how they'd react, if they'd ever get past that twist in the story to actually see us happy together. But I'd already made my choice, and it wasn't just about me anymore. Karen's ghost wouldn't have that hold forever. It couldn't. I figured easing in was the smart move. We didn't come out and drop the bomb that Alex was now, well, in this new role in their lives. Not right away. We let things happen naturally, or as naturally as possible. Alex was always around, like she already had been. The one change was that sometimes she'd stay late, after the kids had gone to bed, and we'd sit up on the couch together, talk for hours about everything we'd never really discussed when Karen was still around. But it was Sophie who noticed first. She was always the sharper one, more perceptive. I'd catch her watching how Alex and I interacted, eyebrows knit together, trying to piece together this new puzzle we'd created. What's going on with you and Aunt Alex? I knew it was coming, but that didn't make it easier. I heard Alex in the kitchen, could sense her listening in, though she was keeping her distance, giving me space to handle this on my own at first. But I paused, thinking about how carefully every word needed to be chosen. No going back once this conversation took off. It's complicated, Soph. And damn was it. I didn't know how to put it into simpler terms because it wasn't just about Alex. Yeah, it was about Karen. About what was left behind, not of her specifically, but the mess her absence left in all our lives. The thing is, Alex and I care about each other a lot. Sophie's nose scrunched. Like boyfriend and girlfriend, her voice laced with confusion, maybe some disgust. I don't blame her. The words felt strange, like I was dirtying something that didn't need to be touched. I nodded, slowly. Felt my chest tighten as I waited for her response. She didn't say anything right away. Just stared at the floor, chewing the carpet. Then, softer than I expected, she asked, "What about Mom?" And that right there was the heart of the matter. What about Karen? I'd been asking myself that same damn question for months. What about her? Her decisions, her betrayal, her selfishness, they'd been eating me alive. But that didn't erase what Sophie remembered of her mom. It didn't change how much of a force Karen was, even now, as some ghost haunting our everyday lives. So I'll always love your mom, Soph. God, it felt like a lie the moment the words left my mouth, or at least incomplete. Not love in the romantic sense, but something complicated, tangled up with bitterness, hurt. But she's gone. And it's time for us to start moving on. Sophie didn't look at me then. Instead, she kept staring down, her small frame tense, fist curling in the fabric of her shirt. "I don't know if I like it," she muttered, a half-confession. Neither did I, truthfully. But what the hell was there to like? This wasn't about liking or disliking. It was just what it was, life moving where it decided, and I had no control left anymore. Jerry took it differently. Mostly because I think he was too young to fully grasp the depth of what was happening. He reacted with vague curiosity, maybe confusion, but there wasn't that gut-pulling resistance Sophie had. His world was simpler, not yet heavy with the memories that pushed against acceptance. The bigger storm came with Karen's parents. I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I spent wrestling with that one. It's hell, even introducing the idea of talking to them made me break out in a cold sweat. Karen's mom, she'd never liked me much after Karen vanished. Hell, before she left, we barely saw eye to eye, but after, she'd become cold, distant, blaming me. In that not-so-subtle passive-aggressive way that only a grieving parent can truly perfect. Still, they had to know. Alex and I invited them over for lunch one weekend. Somewhere familiar where the tension wouldn't be outright smothering. It was uncomfortable. Karen's mum gave Alex this sharp once over the second they walked through the door, her lips pinched in that way that made her face look older than it really was. I didn't sugarcoat it. "Oh, we've grown close," I said. "Alex and I." Silence. Just dead silence, except for the sound of Karen's dad swallowing awkwardly beside his wife. She wouldn't look at me straight, but I noticed the way his hands fidgeted with his chest pocket. Nervous tics showed quicker than words. Karen's mother gave me this look like I'd just shot her daughter twice, a mix of shock, betrayal, and hatred so intense it felt like the room caved in for a second. "He'll what?" No going back now." "How?" "We're together," I said, forcing it out quick before the situation ate me alive inside. "We've been seeing each other for a while, and we want to keep it that way. I know it doesn't make sense to you, but—" "You betrayed her," Karen's mum nearly spat, shaking with rage. "She's gone. She loved you." The irony of the word love coming from her mouth felt like a knife twisting in me, like the universe was playing some sick joke. "Did she?" Alex cut in, her tone sharp. It stunned the room into silence. Karen's mum froze, but that rage still simmered beneath the surface. Alex didn't elaborate, just let that question hang there. And that was what finally sunk in for Karen's mum, or at least it broke part of that wall of anger she'd built in the months since her daughter vanished. No one knew Karen more than her own sister, after all. So they didn't accept it, not right away. But over time, over strained visits and holidays with tension so thick you could feel it in the dinner conversation, the edges softened. Karen's dad, more than her mom, eventually warmed to the situation. He was tired. Hell, I was tired too. We all were. For once, it wasn't about holding on to the past, it was about letting go of a weight I wasn't sure we even needed to carry anymore. The police investigation into Karen's disappearance eventually was closed. No big fanfare. The letter she left had answered more than I ever wanted answered in the first place. Her choices weren't ones I could ever wrap my head around fully. But knowing there wasn't a need to keep the search alive, to keep dragging ourselves through the mud of her secrets, it brought us peace. It brought me peace. And now I was free to start something new. Something real. The grip Karen had on my life was gone, finally, gone with the storm that took her. Alex and I stood on the yacht, not to dwell on the past, but to look ahead. For once.